Welcome to Let's Grow CRM. We always like to jump into the cutting edge here, and there have been some really interesting developments lately in AI. Specifically, there's a report out there that's making some waves, suggesting that an AI model has actually passed, in a sense, a version of the Turing test.
Right.
So for you, the learner, we're going to break down what exactly that Turing test is all about,
Yeah.
why this news is kind of making headlines, and maybe even where a little bit of skepticism might be warranted, right?
For sure.
And then what this might mean for us all going forward. So the basis of this deep dive is a preprint study that gives us a little behind-the-scenes look at really the forefront of AI research.
Absolutely.
Our mission, if you will, for
Yeah.
this deep dive is to really understand what it means for an AI to seemingly achieve human-level conversation,
Right.
to cut through all the excitement,
Yeah.
all the hype, and get to the core of what this signifies for how we think about AI and its potential impact.
It's really fascinating to think about the original idea behind the Turing test.
Right.
Alan Turing
Yeah.
came up with this idea in 1950, and it was really a groundbreaking thought experiment at the time. I mean, he wasn't trying to create a machine that, perfectly mirrored human intelligence in every way,
Right.
but rather he was trying to figure out, could a machine convincingly imitate human conversation?
Okay, so let's delve into this imitation game a little bit. Right?
Yeah.
So Turing proposed, I guess you could say, this scenario where you've got a human interrogator, right?
Right.
They're communicating via text. They can't see or hear the other participants.
Right.
And on the other end of this text exchange, there are two unseen entities. One is a real person, and the other is a machine. And the interrogator's task is to figure out which is which,
Yeah.
based solely on the conversation.
Based on the language, exactly.
And Turing's standard for a machine to pass, as you said, was so simple, but it was so profound. It was if the interrogator couldn't reliably tell the difference between the machine and the human, just through this textual interaction, then according to Turing, we would have to say that the machine had achieved a certain level of intelligence,
A certain level.
at least in the realm of language. It's not necessarily about understanding the internal processes.
Right.
It's about observable behavior, the output.
Exactly.
So,
The appearance of
yeah.
intelligence.
So this new study you mentioned, it basically kind of took this original idea and put a modern spin on it.
Exactly.
Can you walk us through what they actually did and what they found?
Yeah. So they conducted what they called a three-party Turing test. And they did this online with almost 300 participants.
Wow.
So these participants, they took on the role of either the interrogator or one of the two entities being interrogated
Okay.
via text. Of course, one of these entities was a human and the other was an AI model.
Got it.
And this was repeated over 8 rounds with different participants
Oh,
in each role.
okay. And the result that's really catching everyone's eye is how OpenAI's GPT-4.5 model performed.
Right. Exactly. So the study found that when GPT-4.5 was prompted with a persona, which means that it was told to adopt a specific character,
Right.
like say, a young person familiar with internet culture or something like that.
Got it.
It was identified as human a whopping 73% of the time.
Wow.
So you think about it, if you were just randomly guessing, you'd have a 50% chance of getting it right.
Sure.
So 73% is way above chance.
Yeah, that's statistically significant.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And the lead researcher, Cameron Jones, even went on X to say that based on this, the Turing test has resoundingly been beaten.
Yeah, 73% is pretty compelling.
It is.
But I understand that how the AI was prompted played a big role in this.
Absolutely.
Huge role.
So it seems like the picture changes a little bit when we look at different prompting strategies.
Yeah, for sure. So when GPT 4.5 was given a no persona prompt,
Okay.
where it was just basically told to try to convince the interrogator that it was human, its success rate actually dropped to 36%.
And it gets even more nuanced.
Okay.
OpenAI's GPT-4.0,
Mhm.
which is what currently powers ChatGPT,
Right.
and was only tested with no persona prompts in this study,
Okay.
performed even lower at 21%.
Wow.
Now, here's a really interesting twist. You know that early chatbot from the 1960s called ELIZA,
Oh, yeah.
which used relatively simple pattern matching,
Right.
actually did a little bit better than GPT-4.0 in the no persona scenario
Interesting.
with a 23% success rate.
Wow. So the ELIZA outperforming the newer models in that specific context. That's
Yeah.
wild.
It really shows you how much of a difference the prompt makes.
For sure. And you mentioned that Meta's Llama 3.1405B model was also part of the study.
It was, yeah. And interestingly, when it was given a persona prompt, it performed very similarly to GPT-4.5.
Oh, wow.
And Cameron Jones commented on this on X, saying, people were no better than chance at distinguishing humans from GPT-4.5 and Llama with the persona prompt. And 4.5 was even judged to be humans significantly more often than actual humans.
That's fascinating. It almost implies that in that specific context, the AI was better at being human, so to speak, than some of the actual humans who were participating.
Right.
But as exciting as these results are,
Yeah.
we should probably take a step back and recognize some of the limitations here.
For sure.
Right.
Right.
Just because an AI can trick us in a text-based conversation,
Right.
that doesn't automatically mean that it possesses human-like thought or understanding.
Right. That's a crucial distinction. So, passing the Turing test in its original form, and as it was done in this study, doesn't necessarily mean that the AI has, genuine human-like consciousness or comprehension.
Right.
As Francois Chalet, who's a software engineer at Google, pointed out back in 2023,
Yeah.
Turing himself intended the test to be more of a thought experiment to explore the concept of intelligence
Sure.
rather than a definitive measure of true intelligence.
I see. So it's more about the appearance of intelligence.
Exactly.
Yeah. The ability to kind of convincingly imitate human conversation.
Mimicry.
Yeah, rather than the underlying mechanisms of thought and understanding.
Exactly.
And these large language models, GPT-4.5, Llama, they're trained on just massive amounts of human-generated text.
Absolutely. Massive amounts of data.
So in a way, they've become incredibly adept at recognizing and replicating patterns in language.
Yeah, they're masters of linguistic patterns.
Right, even if they don't have a real-world understanding of what they're actually talking about.
Exactly. They can produce responses that sound very plausible, human-like.
Right.
Even when faced with questions that they may not truly understand in the same way that a human would.
Right. And Cameron Jones himself acknowledges this.
He does.
Saying that this study provides one among many other pieces of evidence for the kind of intelligence LLMs display.
Right.
And he rightly points out that the implications for, what we consider true AI intelligence are very complicated.
Absolutely, yeah.
So while these findings are a significant technical achievement, right?
Yeah.
We shouldn't necessarily leap to the conclusion that AI is, about to become sentient.
Right, right.
But Jones also brings up what I think is a much more immediate and pressing concern when it comes to the real-world implications of all of this, right?
Absolutely. He suggests that maybe a more pressing concern stemming from this research is the potential for these highly convincing LLMs to stand in for human beings in short online interactions without us even realizing it.
So let's talk about how this could potentially play out in the real world. What are some of the downsides, the areas where we might need to be a little bit concerned?
Well, just imagine, the potential for increased automation in jobs that rely on online text-based customer service or communication. If AI can handle those interactions seamlessly and convincingly,
right,
businesses might see that as a cost-saving opportunity.
Of course.
And replace human workers. And then there's the potential for these AI models to be used in more sophisticated social engineering attacks.
Like phishing and things like that?
Exactly. Think about phishing scams or online manipulation tactics that are just far more convincing because the AI is so good at sounding human.
Yeah.
And on an even broader societal level, as these technology become more widespread, it could lead to increased disruption.
Yeah.
Because it becomes harder to tell the difference
You have to discern
between genuine human interaction
and an AI. It's not even necessarily about whether or not the AI is thinking like us.
Right.
It's about whether it can act as if it is, and the consequences of that. And Jones makes another really interesting point. He says that the Turing test, in a way, isn't just about measuring the AI.
Right.
It also reflects our own changing perceptions of technology. So as we get more used to interacting with AI in our daily lives, maybe our ability to spot the difference between a human and a machine in text-based interactions will also change.
Our sensitivity to the cues, to the inconsistency.
Right, it becomes a moving target.
Exactly. What might fool us today might not fool us a year or two down the line as we get more familiar with these kinds of interactions. So it's constantly evolving.
So to sum all this up for you, the learner, this deep dive into the research, really shows us that a leading AI model, GPT-4.5, has demonstrated this but that ability for convincing mimicry is a powerful thing in itself.
Absolutely.
And it has big implications for the real world.
Yeah.
So that leads us to a final thought that I want to leave you with.
Okay.
Given that AI can now convincingly impersonate humans in text-based interactions,
Right.
what aspects of our digital lives,
Yeah.
our interactions, do you think are going to be most affected by this?
Right.
And how might our understanding of trust and authenticity need
Mhm.
to adapt as we move forward in this constantly evolving landscape? Because it's not just about the technology, it's about how we as humans navigate this world where the lines between human and artificial communication are becoming increasingly blurred.
Absolutely.
So that's something for you to think about. Until next time, this has been Let's Grow CRM.
Let's grow CRM.